Welcome to week 3, the elements part 2. In the first week we talked about performing media and what is sound. Now we're going to talk about some other elements of music, such as rhythm, melody, harmony, key, texture, form, and style. All of these things relate to the basic understanding of music. So that's why we're addressing them all now. As we move through the semester, you're going to be able to use the words you learned this week and last week to describe the music you're later hearing. So this is why we spend as much time on these basic concepts as we do. If you have questions about any of this material, please remember that you can use the FAQ forum, the discussion boards, and you can also use the online office hours. We are skipping chapter 4, so please don't read chapter 4 unless you want to do that on your own time for your own benefit. We skip that because this class is not intended to teach musical notation, simply to teach you about music. So, on to chapter 3. This chapter is about rhythm. So of course the first concept in the chapter is what is rhythm. Then we talk about beat, meter, accent and syncopation, and tempo. So we have to ask ourselves, what is rhythm? Rhythm is the flow of music through time. It's a part of our lives in lots of ways. Think about the cycle of seasons, spring, summer, fall, winter, that repeats over and over again on just a flow of time. Or think about your breathing and heartbeat. Those are things that recur, whether we think about them or not, over and over again, in specific speeds, and they simply are there, recurring, pulsing. Those things that pulse in our lives, that cycle in our lives, can also be related to music, and that is what rhythm is. I've included a rhythm tree here simply because I want you to know what it looks like to include rhythm in music. The whole note you see at the top, just that open circle, let's for example say that equals 4 seconds in time. Half of that time value is 2 seconds. Half again is 1 second. And half of that is half a second. That's how we divide the different notations in time. So a whole note equals 4 seconds. A half note, which is half of a whole note, equals 2 seconds. A quarter note, which is half of a half note, equals 1 second, etc., etc. So then we can notate rhythm using a grouping or a mix of these different rhythmic notations. And that way we see the flow and the organized flow of music through time. Many aspects to rhythm. The first being beat. Beat is a regular recurring pulse that divides music into equal units of time. In other words, it's like your heartbeat. It's something that recurs over and over and over again. It pulses, and that pulse divides time. So, if you have a piece of music, a beat is something that divides that piece of music into set recurring pulses. If you look at page 29 in your book, you're going to see a few examples. They use the song My Country 'Tis of Thee. If you don't know how that goes, feel free to look that up on YouTube. This is what it sounds like. My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Now, what is the beat of that piece of music? What is the flow of the rhythm? Well, this is a regular recurring pulse. Can I then sing over top of this pulse? Sure. My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. So that particular piece of music can be divided into that recurring pulse or beat. They're equal units of time that are consistent throughout the singing of a song. The next aspect of rhythm is meter. Meter is the organization of beats into regular groupings. So think about that for a second. This is how we group the beats we just learned about. Why do we need to do this? Well, mostly because human beings like to feel larger groupings of beats. It gets a little tired if all you always hear is a regular pulse that never changes, it's always the same, and there's no grouping to it. We like to hear things that have emphasis. Even the word emphasis has 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Emphasis. So that relates to music, and that's how we group beats together to create meter. Take a look at the example below. This is again, My Country 'Tis of Thee. If I just say it, my country 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. There's no beat pattern. When I sang it before, I created a beat pattern underneath it. If I then emphasize certain beats, I can create regular groupings to create a meter, such as this. My country 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. So I emphasize the first of every 3 beats, making this a meter divided into 3 beats per group. Does that make sense to you all? I hope it does. If you want to look further into this topic, your book does go into a lot more detail about the different types of meter that are created and how they're created. Feel free to go and listen to the radio and see whether you can create a beat pattern for music and then a meter that those songs are made from. Here are 2 other examples of meter, just to give you a better idea. These are both taken from your book. Here's our beat pattern again, with no emphasis, with no meter. It's simply a recurring pulse. Mary had a little lamb, little lamb, little lamb. So you can see that there's no emphasis and there's no meter created. But look at the line below and see how the 1 is always darkened to emphasize that they want to try and divide this into a meter with 2 beats per group. So let's try that. Mary had a little lamb, little lamb, little lamb. I like that a lot better. How about you? It gives the song a little bit more excitement and a little bit more phrasing. In other words, it goes someplace. It creates a full thought rather than creating simply 1 pulse that's pretty boring. Try the one below on your own and see whether you can try and group the beats into groups of 4 to create a meter in 4 beats per group. Now let's talk about the next aspect of rhythm. This is about accent and syncopation. These 2 concepts are pretty related. An accent is an emphasis on 1 beat or note that's usually created with dynamics. Syncopation is an unexpected accent. So it's when an accent occurs where we do not expect. So think to your Mary Had a Little Lamb one more time. You've just created a double meter and you've had your regular pulsing. When you emphasize that first beat, you're emphasizing by creating a louder sound that has a sharper quality to it. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Mary had a little lamb, little lamb, little lamb. Now, we usually wouldn't sing it with that much emphasis on 1 beat or accent on 1 beat, but in order to really show you or help you hear what an accent would sound like, you need to exaggerate a little bit in this case. So here's our beat again. Mary had a little lamb, little lamb, little lamb. Okay, so accent is simply an emphasis that's placed on an expected beat. Syncopation is when it's unexpected. Try to emphasize the second syllable of the 2-syllable words. Mary had a little lamb, little lamb, little lamb. Sounds really weird. It sounds weird when you sing it too. Mary had a little lamb, little lamb, little lamb. Right? Nobody would sing it that way. But in jazz, popular music, romantic, 20th century classical music, all of those genres have lots of syncopation because it gives excitement to the music. Alright, the next aspect of rhythm that we're going to talk about is tempo. There are lots of ways to describe tempo, and we use these tempo indications here. Tempo itself is the speed of the beat. It's how fast or slow the music flows. Think about speaking. If you're going to speak at a largo tempo, you would speak very slowly, broadly. But if you were going to speak at a vivace tempo, a lively tempo, you'd talk so fast nobody can understand you. See my point? So in music, we use tempo to figure out how fast our beats are going to move. I've been using a moderate tempo or moderato tempo. But if we wanted to instead sing Mary Had a Little Lamb very fast or in a presto tempo, perhaps it would sound like this. Mary had a little lamb, little lamb, little lamb. Mary had a little lamb, a face as white as snow. You get the idea. More words related to tempo, and then this chapter's done. You need to know two more words, ritardando and accelerando. Ritardando is becoming slower, and accelerando is becoming faster. This kind of relates back to decrescendos and crescendos when we talked about a gradual change in sound quality over time. In this case, we're talking about the tempo, the speed of the tempo, or the speed of the rhythm, slowing down or speeding up. When that tempo starts out perhaps presto and slows down over time to grave, that is called a ritardando. So, now that you know all of your basic words related to rhythm, you need to listen to a few examples. My best suggestion to help you understand this is to go and listen to the radio. You need to listen to lots of the music you already listen to every day, but really listen to it just like you did when thinking about sound, pitch, tone color. But now instead think about how fast the music moves or how slow it moves. Think about whether it has a recurring pulse that always is there, keeping track of where the music is flowing. Think about whether you can divide that beat into larger groups to create a meter. I have included one link below that you can copy and paste into your browser. It's an example of the Blue Man Group. If you don't know this group, it's a really fun visual musical ensemble. The guys paint themselves blue and do lots of crazy things. The first couple minutes of the example are actually the coolest, I think, and they really show how you can divide time and have a flow that creates music. Percussion instruments are the ones that really help us create rhythm. And so the Blue Man Group, a percussion group, is what I've chosen to show you as an example. Listen to it, enjoy, and if you have questions, use the FAQ form and your discussion boards to post.